Hi Facebook world, this is Kamal Fernandez. Obviously you're in my group, so you kind of know that. With my good friend Kathy Santo. I am currently in New Jersey. I've been here teaching, delivering seminars, and on my downtime, Kathy's a really, really good friend, and I thought it's a bit of a mix of business and pleasure, and that Kathy has an amazing team behind her who happen to be helping me with a project that's going to be coming up at the end of September, so keep an eye out for that. The other thing about Kathy, this is the person who is having great. So the puppy that I currently have at home, this is her future owner, slash mum, slash whatever, and that's her fur baby, shall we say, yeah? So Kathy has very kindly, she's going to give you a little bit of background when I stop talking about herself and what she does, but the premise of this conversation that we're going to have is about canine body language and how it relates to what we do as professional dog trainers, and hopefully give you guys some insights that Kathy's got a really, really great, cool gift that we're going to talk about later and let you know about. So, so just want to tell them a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yes. Hi guys. First of all, can we talk about the irony of the fact that he and I are both having Starbucks? He's drinking coffee, and I'm a tea drinker.
Yeah, the US American tea drinker and the Brit that's a coffee drinker. I think we should get something for product placement from Starbucks.
The latte and the English breakfast tea.
Yeah.
The irony of it.
Yeah, the irony with the half German, half American mixture that you are.
I'm a multicultural.
Yeah.
Multicultural. All right, so my background is that I started out in competition obedience, and my last dog, there used to be games tournaments. Like, I'm really old. You have no idea. I'm really old. But my dog had won a games tournament, and then the last dog I had was a border collie. It was amazing. I actually sent you a video.
Yep.
And she got her championship, and it took me 3 weekends to get her arch.
So just to explain to everybody, those of you that aren't from the States, so, excuse me, games used to, because I don't think they don't have games anymore. So games was like the big premier competition in the US where everybody wanted to compete at, and it was a really, really prestigious event. And Kathy's downplaying her. Kathy's made up obedience champions, so the equivalent in the UK of obedience champions. She had one particular dog called Trigger, who was incredible, and basically Kathy made that dog a champion within 3 days of three competitions.
5 shows.
So that was an exceptional dog with obviously a very, very capable and talented trainer and competitor. So then you went from competitive dog training to which is your main thing now.
Right. I went from competitive dog training to pretty much the pet market. Well, the dog, when she was 2, she was put down because she had a heart tumor. Yeah. So the career was like done. Yeah. And since then I haven't been in the ring. It was just like, it was a heartbreak. Yeah. And then my kids were little too. Yeah. So I'm like, all right, I'm just going to teach the pet market. And then that sort of swelled to what it is now. Yeah. And I wrote a book, and it was by Knopf. They published it at Random House. Then I wrote the story, did a lot of TV, a lot of magazines. I still write for the AKC, for their Family Dog magazine. And so that just sort of became my thing. And what I had in Florida was primarily a competition-oriented school. So I kind of flipped. Yeah. And I've been in this world for probably 22 years. Really. So pet training, domestic dog training, life skills, behavioural problems, reactive dogs. Right. You're doing a seminar on aggressive dogs? This weekend, Monday, Labor Day, I'm doing a seminar on aggression. Okay. So just, again, that competition background which laid the foundation for you then to go and help people with their domestic behavioural issues. So just to give people an idea of how many dogs would you deal with in the week? How many dogs would you go through? Because Kathy has a dog training school and business in New Jersey, which is, and it's about 10 minutes from here, your place? It's about 6 minutes, okay. And it's a huge school. I should take you there. We'll go there tonight. How many members of staff? I have 36. 36 members of staff with how many dogs? 7 are trainers. And how many, so that is boarding, training, grooming, daycare. Everything but vet, which my daughter's going to school to be. Okay. So 7 years from now. Who knows? And we see a couple hundred dogs a week. Couple of hundred. So just to show the magnitude of dogs that Kathy and her team work with,
hundreds of dogs in a week, and over a year, if you multiply that, you're talking thousands and thousands and thousands of dogs.
Lots of dogs.
Yeah. So incredibly well versed in reading dogs, assessing dogs, and being able to help owners with their dogs. And this conversation was really about talking about canine body language and things that to be aware of, and simple things that people often can miss, whether it be in the competition arena, which we both have obviously had experience of, or the domestic/pet lifestyles entity as well, which can often lead to dogs coming to Kathy and I for behavioural issues when there's been telltale signs that that dog is either uncomfortable, stressed, anxious, etc., which has been a precursor to normally, like say, a bite incidents, or something more serious where, you know, that's when they cross our path. So any sort of like, what is, because the big thing that we have in the UK is a real rise, I would say, in dogs that have reactivity issues. And I have a real, I have a real issue with the term reactivity, and I've written a blog about that and my gripe with the word reactivity. But dogs that have issues that would be described as reactive. Just a little bit about what's your take on it then, as a professional?
A lot of the dogs, I think there's a whole bunch of things. I think they're misread. I think owner tension causes it to escalate. And then I see a lot here of people saying, well, I'm going to medicate the dog.
Yeah. Oh, really?
I'm going to put it on Prozac, I'm going to put it on Clomicalm, whatever else. Which then gets you a dog who's still thinking those thoughts, but slower. Yeah. Right? And then the response of the people to it. Right. Sometimes it's like they just come down on the dog's head, and that's not really the answer. And sometimes they tell the dog to sit and feed it, and so the dog says, oh, I got the cookie by acting this way. Yeah. And then there's just a mishmash. There's a middle
ground, isn't there? It's two extremes. And I think we see the same in the UK, in that although I'm not adverse to, I think there's certain instances with extreme levels of anxiety, etc., where medication can buy you time whilst you go through a systematic process of elimination. For example, medicating a dog whilst you deduce, is there an underlying physiological issue?
It has to be pain. 2 pieces.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But I think there's also a trend, and there is certain parts where that's becoming the solution to a problem. And I know I've had numerous dogs that cross my path that have been long-term medicated. I'm sure you have, which is really a scapegoat for actually dog training and being able to help these dogs.
Correct, because it's a life of management. Yeah. You fill the prescription, and you make sure X, Y, and Z never happen. Except we know that in real life, you're going to get sick, and you're going to have something happen in your life, and you're not going to manage properly, and then it goes. Like I showed you the video of the little terrier. They came to me in a muzzle, and I've never seen a muzzle like this. It had a mask for its eyes, and the dog had been in the behaviorist for a year, and a behaviorist trainer for a year, and it was all blocking and feeding and medication. And we finally just said to the dog straight up, you can't act like that. And in 10 minutes, he was meeting new friends and walking around.
And it was done like Kathy showed me the video, and it was very, very, like, nothing, no extremes, no violence, nothing like that. It was just a case of, we don't want you to do that. We'd rather you do this, and really, really reinforce the correct behaviour, and within a relatively short period. And the feedback from the owner is that you've got a happy dog, happy owner.
She can walk the dog now. This is a year and a half. Can you imagine living like that for a year and a half? She couldn't go near the windows with the dog because the dog would react from the house too. It was anxiety provoking.
So why do you think that's you know, you and I have been training dogs a little while. Why do you think there's been that shift then? What's your opinion? Why has there been a shift? Because I would say, in my experience, certainly when I first started, that dogs just, not that they weren't reactive, but it wasn't perceived in quite the same way. Do you know what I mean? Like, people either dealt with the dog's problems. I'm not saying it was always pretty, but there was like less issues. And we didn't have a big problem with reactive dogs. It just wasn't. Do you not think?
Right. And I feel that even in the competition years ago, we would do stays, and you would never have a fight break out of stays out of sight. And now the APC has actually taken away the out of sight stays, and it's on leash now because of this problem. So I personally, it's my own opinion, I think it goes to breeding. Right. We've talked about that, personal experience. I also think that there's an over-socialization. It's really weird that to say that, right? Because I think that the dogs are forced to meet so many dogs. It's like, and petted by people as well. So everybody that walks by, can you pet my puppy? Can you pet my puppy?
Yeah.
If I was in the mall and everybody who walked by me was rubbing my arm,
you become anxious.
I would be anxious, or I'd smack them,
Yeah.
or I would just be like, "Oh yay, come pet me," and then I'm over greeting, and then I get corrected for it.
And then you then meet, if you're over friendly, then you're going to meet somebody and potentially create aggression or reactivity within that person. So it's like a cycle, isn't it? You know?
Right.
Yeah. That's a really, really interesting point, and I'd absolutely echo that. And I think that, like, if we look at the time span of dog training, so there was a point of where we didn't actively make a point of socialization wasn't such a thing. And I don't know whether it's because we got away with dogs that had good genetics and we didn't have the necessity to socialize, but there was a shift in that, you know, and there was a there was a whole spate of puppy classes where it was a lot more like a little bit like Lord of the Flies with puppies. It was like, stick them in a room and let's see what happens. And you know, we watched them as, you know, social interactions unfold without any teaching, learning, any constructive management of the environment, etc., etc. Which I think there's the spill, the fallout from that is having dogs that have really, really poor social skills. And I think that we need to change our perception of socializing in that manner. I think that socialization is necessary, but it needs to be like you would raise a child, like I raising Neve, and Kathy has 2 children. They were engaged in activities. So Kathy's kids did drum corps, and that was a thing where actually it was a mechanism for socialization and interaction. We were just talking about at lunch how Kathy over the years has had numerous exchange students come over and stay and interact with their kids. So her kids were being socialized with different cultures, different ways of being, different languages, different forms of interaction. So for her kids had fantastic socialization because of Kathy being and her husband being proactive about it. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think the socialization with dogs, I don't think people take into account the unique individual that they have. Right. So if you were if you decided, okay, adults need to be socialized, and your idea of socializing me was taking me out to a nightclub every single night, I would hate my life and probably move and not tell you where I'd move to. I much prefer, after a day of training and being with a lot of people and dogs, to come home, chill around the couch with my family, and you know, throw TV or music on, and just unwind with tea. But so if you're saying that this shepherd and this pug and this Mal and this Golden all need the same kind of socialization, you don't take into account the individual breeds and personalities of that, it's a recipe for disaster.
And I've talked to numerous occasions that my experience is that each breed of dog has their own unique dialect. They have their own. So German Shepherd going up and instigating play with another dog. German Shepherd is very like physical. It's grabby. It's mauly. It's like biting. It's a bit shoulder barging, and that to them means, oh hi. That's just a simple way of saying hello.
Like
how are you? Exactly.
They're like frat boys.
Yes. So, but when you get a German Shepherd mixed with something, say like a Sheltie, the Sheltie is going to see its life flash before its eyes, isn't it? With that sort of interaction. So we need to educate the Sheltie that dog comes in peace, and we also need to educate the German Shepherd that actually you really can't do that with all dogs, and they need to be able to be well versed in assessing, reading, and gauging the other dog appropriately. And that one of the things that I advocate is proactive play dates. So I make a concerted effort with all my puppies, and I've done it with Kathy's puppy or potential puppy, great, who has met different types of dogs. Obviously I have numerous type of dogs of my own, and she's had constructive, controlled interactions with those dogs, so that she has an experience from them. So with Sugar she has an experience versus Punch, she has an experience versus Scooter and Thriller, for example, all my different breeds of dogs, so that she's learning a lesson from meeting them versus just saying work out for yourself, as it were.
Right. And I don't accept I don't accept many invitations to socialize my puppy with other people's dogs. Because I don't really know their dog, and I really want engagement from my puppy and to me. So if I teach my puppy, when we go out, every dog you see you're going to meet, every person you see is going to give you food, then I sort of diminish who I am. The other thing I really get annoyed about is people, they're walking their puppy and another dog barks at it and the puppy startles. Now they've got to go out and find 100 examples of dogs who might bark at their puppies so they can work them through it. But you know what? Sometimes the puppy just shakes it off and goes on with it. And you now are going to create a problem It's like if I was walking down the street and like car backfired,
Mm-hmm.
you definitely don't have to have 100 cars backfire by me to make me feel okay with it. I resolved it on my own.
Yeah.
It doesn't always mean it's going to be a lasting
Yeah,
problem.
yeah. And you've got to gauge the puppy. I think sometimes they can overkill it. You know, they like my dog has a bad experience with black dogs. I'm now going to bombard them with black dogs, which sometimes can actually make it. It's a form of flooding, isn't it? Almost, you know.
Right. And don't you have bad experiences like and like in real life, like people rear end you. We're gonna get rear ended 100 times to get over it. I don't think so. Once is enough.
Yeah, and sometimes you can allowing the dog to just move on its own time.
Right. And don't make a big deal about it.
Yeah.
But this whole thing about we have to recreate it, we have to re-socialize it, over-socialize it because it might be afraid.
Yeah.
Actually, I think can cause some of that.
Yeah. And the parallel with that, funny enough, I had somebody was discussing actually one of the exercises that their dog had a one-off instance of the dog did something, and they said, "Is that something the dog does?" And they said no. But this was several months ago, and they were saying now they wanted to, they had a lesson with me, and they wanted to work on this particular issue. And I was like, well, you know, prior to that one-off instance where the dog basically got spooked, the dog was doing a go out and the jumps, and the jump happened to be in the direction of sort of air heater blowing out.
Yeah.
So the dog is, you know, it's a softer dog, and it got a little bit spooked. So because the dog then, when I'm not going to do that particular jump, she then overkilled it and went trained it in blah blah. The dog didn't have a problem beforehand, and the dog probably wouldn't have had a problem afterwards if you'd just gone, oh well, that happens, life happens. Let's just ignore that ever happened.
Right.
You know, totally forget it and attempt. You know, maybe the dog would have
made it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
by
exactly.
addressing it and looking
so
at it.
intently. Yeah. Yeah.
And but that's an obedience thing. I do.
Yeah.
I remember that. You know, if something happened, you were like, "Holy crap!
Yeah.
I better recreate this and fix it
Yeah.
so it doesn't happen in the ring." But sometimes just letting it, stepping back from it.
Absolutely.
And it depends. You got to know your dog.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing I was going to say about body language is a classic thing that certainly you see is being able to read your dog. The classic things of stress, anxiety, which can sometimes, certainly in dog sports, a really, really simple one that people misread all the time is the dog sniffing on the floor, and they're convinced that there's a plethora of food on the floor. In actual fact, that's actually the dog showing a very distinct sign of anxiety and displacement in relation to what is about to happen, what might happen, the environment, etc., etc. And it's something I deal with all the time, that people go, oh, there must have been treats here, there must be a bitch here, there must be a nice smell. In actual fact, no, it's actually a little bit deeper than that. It's actually to do with the dog's thinking and feeling and emotion towards the task they're about to do. In your experience, is there a common thing that people misread with their domestic, your 400 dogs that come to your school?
Right.
What's the most common thing that people misread in their dogs?
I think it's whether or not the dog wants to be petted.
Oh, really?
Right.
Good
So
one.
the kids are petting the dog, and I see it all the time. The parents come in with the families, which is awesome. I love seeing the families. And the kids will be petting the dog, and it'll move away, and they pull it back, and they keep petting it. So I've taught them the 5-second rule.
Right.
And so you pet your dog for 5 seconds, and then you take your hand off. And if the dog moves away, it's obviously saying, no, thank you.
Yep.
If it stands neutrally, it's kind of neutral about it. But if they nudge you and snuggle you, they want more.
Yeah.
So I want them to have a great relationship with their dog, first and foremost. So I want the dog to say, hey, they respect how I feel.
Oh,
it would be like if you hug someone and they're pulled away and you kept bringing them to you. It wouldn't make them a fan of you.
Yeah.
Also, I think it helps decrease the amount of bites that happen because the tension in the dog around those kids isn't going to be there because the kids are going to respect the dog. So that's a really big one for me.
Oh, that's a really good one. I think that's something that so many people, and I know so many people misread. And since having Neve, a lot of people approached me about how I introduced Neve to my dogs. And my dogs have all got really, really nice temperaments, but they're dogs at the end of the day. And it was done again very cautiously. I held her on my lap, but it was done systematically. And I police Neve's interaction with my dogs, and the reason being is because she's one and they're dogs, and you go, they're both unpredictable beings, and you go, I don't want her to innocently act like a 1-year-old and the dog act like a dog, and that end up really, really badly.
And I've seen it.
Yeah.
I mean, I've done this 3 decades. Because I'm really old. And I should have taken pictures of all the kids that were bitten by the family dog that would never bite. And it was really a management issue. And I taught my kids from a really young age. I remember having the conversation with them when they were her age. Like, oh, is that dog happy or sad when we'd be driving? And they'd be happy, look at the tail. And I'd say, oh, actually, the tail is wagging, but do you see how it's not moving in its body? That means it's not happy. Because I think the kids...
Oh, that's really good.
They're victims of the media in that sense.
Because
the cartoons and the Disney, right?
Yeah.
And even in magazines, the kids are always hugging. In addition, they see people who are also hugging their dogs. So if they go on a play date or go to a friend's house with you, and the kid is laying on the dog. So I would teach my kids, I would teach them, so as they got older, those lessons would get more advanced. To the point where my daughter, when she first started working at the vet, her first day, she said to the girl, "You're going to get bitten." And the girl's like, "No, I'm not," another tech. And she's like, "You're about to get bitten." And the girl's like, "No, I'm not." And the dog went after her.
Wow.
So 3 more of those, and they were like, "How do you know? What are you, the dog whisperer?"
Yeah.
And Lisa's like, I don't really know how I know, but I can tell what that dog is saying. And she can tell because I raised her and my son to be that way.
Because you had dogs in the house all the time.
They don't even know. It's like reading a book.
Yeah.
They just see the words on the page, they see the body on the dog, and they're sensitive to it. So...
Oh, that's a great takeaway. So educating those of you. Actually, this was one of the comments in one of my previous posts was about kids and dogs, and we've got a great thing that Kathy's going to give you guys, which we'll release at the end of the live. But that's a really, really great one. Educating your children, whether it be your children, your grandchildren, your friends' kids, about reading dogs and asking them to actually make conscious observations. Is that dog happy? Oh yeah, great, it is. Oh, is it? Let's take a closer look. That's such a great piece of information.
Yeah, it really helped. And then as they get older, the conversation gets more detailed.
Yeah.
And I said, and you'll be saying it too, when your kid comes home from a play date, and she'll say, "Oh, but Madison's mom lets her hug her dog," and I say, "Oh, Madison's mom has different rules than us." Thinking in my head, and Madison's dog is going to be a student probably in 0.2 seconds because it's going to bite her in the face. But you know, it teaches them how to read it independently of you.
Well,
and then when you just say, "Oh, you know what else I do? I never let my kids pet dogs when they were toddlers and just senseless."
Other people's dogs. Yeah, good one.
Because then it magnetized them to other dogs. And you see it all the time. There's a toddler and they're coming right for your dog. Most likely it was raised to, pat, they take their hand and they pet your dog, and it's like, you cannot do that. Because then they're face height to a dog and they're going to get nailed. Yeah.
And it's like it takes one-off instance. And, you know, the argument is, "Oh, are you being over-cautious?" And you go, "Yeah, I really am being over-cautious because I don't want the dog to have a negative experience and I don't want the child to have a negative experience."
Right.
And if you lay the foundations correctly, you can end up having, Kathy's, both her kids, they have their own dogs. It's like, they live at the house, but they have their own dogs, which when Ryan moved away, he took his dog with him. So they have a really close affinity, and Alyssa's dog was that from work?
Yes.
Yeah, it was so it's one of the dogs from her, from the vet that she ended up taking on. So they have an affinity with dogs that's going to last them a lifetime because of the way in which you've guided them and steered them to interact with dogs appropriately and respectfully.
It's no different than teaching them to drive a car or to write or do math. I mean, it's a subject. And if you don't teach the subject, they're going to get taught it incorrectly by somebody else's dog.
That's a really good one. So, in terms of, have you got any tips for people reading their own dogs that you see? You said about the dog being petted was a good one.
Right, the 5-second rule.
Any other things that you think would be really beneficial for people to know that would help them be aware of their dog's body language?
I think that most people, and the competition people, I think, know better than the pet people, right?
Yeah.
But pet people tend to think of stillness as acquiescing.
Right.
Because if 2 kids are wrestling and one just goes limp, that means he gives in.
Right.
But when a dog goes stiff, he's really counting to 3 or 2 or 1 before he goes to the next level. Yeah. So I always have them watching for the stiffness of the dog.
Right.
Especially when it has a toy, things like that. I teach them what the dog is hanging around the house. They should walk past it, say the dog's name, and chuck it a really good treat.
Yep.
Something high value.
Yep.
So that the dog alerts with their head up to something.
Yeah.
They tend to, if the dog grabs something, they tend to chase the dog.
Yeah.
And sometimes the dog gets in that space of, "Oh my God, you're chasing me, and I have something, now I have to get defensive."
Yeah.
So the out for that is I tell them to ring their own doorbell or jingle their car keys or just change the subject and then work on it later.
Yeah.
Things like that.
Yeah. That's a really good one. So diffusing any potential instances where it could escalate and become volatile or dangerous, etc. It's certainly in terms of competition. Although, yes, I think that people are a little bit becoming more savvy. But there's also, there's a train of thought saying about stress, frustration, and avoiding stress, avoiding frustration, and that topic. And I personally believe that stress and frustration are part and parcel of daily life. We need to teach our dogs to cope with it strategically and in a very mindful manner, so that our dogs become resilient and they become confident and they deal with things like frustration and environmental stress or stress in their day-to-day life in a concise and positive way and in a systematic way. What's your thinking about stress and frustration because that can sometimes be a contentious subject.
Right. I mean, I think you have to teach them to handle it. Can you imagine if our kids went to school and they were stressed out about math?
Yeah.
And I said, you know what, I'm going to go with you.
Yeah.
And every time that teacher goes to the blackboard, I'm going to stand in front of her.
Yeah.
I'm going to stand in front of you so you don't have to look at the math problems. And then when you look relaxed, I'm going to feed you candy. So that gets me nowhere.
Yeah.
So there have to be ways that you teach a dog to handle stress. And maybe that's you move farther away from it.
Perfect.
And you incrementally go up closer to it. Maybe it's saying, is this a stress that's going to be in my everyday life? So if your dog was spooked by a motorized wheelchair, assess your life and say, am I going to be around a lot of those? Is it something I need to take on right now?
Yeah.
Or is the priority like come when you're called?
Yeah.
And I'm going to go around that. So I really don't like the idea of avoiding it. I like the idea of confronting it head on and saying, we're going to get through this together.
Yeah. And that's a great relationship builder, isn't it? To give your dog confidence to deal with it. And I think, I'm sure you say the same, that a lot of the times that those things are as a result of, and I think you mentioned this earlier about the owner or the handler's issues about dealing with coping with stress and frustration. And often they're either lack of confidence or knowledge or experience to deal with those in a proactive way.
Or their history.
Yeah, their history can sometimes manifest itself in the dog. I know I see that quite a lot. How do you say for the dogs that come to your classes or and that you work with that have clearly frustration / stress tolerance issues, how do you help them get over that?
A lot of them don't even know their owner came to class with them on the first day.
Right.
And so we try to create that relationship, that understanding of we're here together and we're going to do something together. Because really, it's very interesting in the pet market. I mean, people have a dog because they wanted a dog, or their husband wanted a dog, or their kids wanted a dog, but there's no connection.
Right.
And if I lead out talking about we're going to have a relationship together, they're like, you know what, I just wanted to sit and come and not poop on my carpet. So you really can't go in that way, but you sort of sneak it around. One of the games I teach initially is ready, ready, catch.
Okay.
Because I know a dog has to face you to catch the treat.
Right.
Right. So I'm not rewarding him for aggressing or getting nervous.
Yeah.
I'm saying when we go in this room, I have your food and we're going to do ready, ready, catch.
Yeah.
I also teach them not to tolerate things, but in a nice way.
Yeah.
Like if the dog were to rush towards, good example, if the dog were to rush towards somebody with a baby carriage.
Yeah.
You gently take the dog by the collar and say, oh, you know what, I don't think we're doing that.
Yeah.
And you let go and you give him the choice. If he lunges again, you back him up again. And the dog, it's amazing to see the dog look at the owner and go, you're here? Like, when did you get here? Like, I'm not your Uber driver. I'm here with you all the time. And so it's creating that awareness. And once you get the awareness, the dogs start to look to the owner for direction. And then the owner's like, I don't know what to give him for direction. And that's when you plug it into the owner. But you're really dealing with the two species. Like the person's lack of understanding and then the dog's feeling that they're two separate entities. There's no teamwork going on.
Yeah, and I think there's a misconception that when, for example, that example that you use when you say to the dog, oh, it's not acceptable for you to run ish and try and bite me, and yes, we're going to create distance, etc., that it needs to be dealt with in a way that's punitive or using aversive, and that nothing could be further from the truth. It's about education, isn't it? And taking what is potentially a dangerous or volatile situation and going, actually, how about we do this? Let's do sits, let's do downs, let's get your focus, let's move further away to create confidence for the dog and therefore improve and harness or capture a relationship with the dog.
It's a combination of the two of those things, right?
Yeah.
Because, and I tell people, like the little dogs who are lunging and barking. The owner's going to hold the leash with one finger. And it's not like when you have a Mal or a St. Bernard doing, right? But I tell them, but when your dog does this, I know he's not going to bite the dog, or if he does, it's like, nothing. But he's going to get eaten too. Yeah. Because there's going to be a dog with PTSD who sees that dog and wants to nail it. Or a dog who goes, I've always wanted to grab a bunny, and then goes for it. So your little dog has to be as well behaved as the bigger dogs. You can't just scoop it up and walk on with it. You have to teach it manners.
Yeah. Oh, that's a really good one. I think that giving your dog reinforcement, absolutely the way to train your dog. Creating distance is a really, really good way to help your dog get confident. And also, one of the things I'm sure that you'll echo this is getting, the right help, getting the people that can support you. I mean, I'm sure you're very supportive of your clients and your students, and giving them the information. You've got an amazing team around you that are able to work with your clients to be able to give them. And I think that sometimes with those of people that aren't in the know, it's finding and identifying the path of which they want to train their dogs, isn't it? And that can sometimes be a little bit of a sticky process or a dodgy process. But once you've identified the way in which you want to train your dog, and the thing is about certainly, today's, like we're talking about YouTube and stuff, there's so much information, sometimes it can be overwhelming, can't it?
I tell them I'd like to break their Google before they come to me, because they're saying, oh, you know what I learned? I learned that when there's a bowl of food, I should take it away and give it back, or put my hand in it to make sure the dog isn't going to be aggressive. And I say, if you were sitting down to dinner and I came in the room and took your plate away and gave it back, I mean, how many times do I do that before you stab me with your fork or you guard it from me? So you're actually, with some of these things, creating the problem that you're trying to avoid. And it's really, really sad.
And I think the takeaway from that is encouraging people to, I suppose, really just employ a little bit of common sense, isn't it, really? It's like, if we step back and take the Disney-esque approach to training dogs, or the perception of dogs, and just applying, like you say, the amount of times we've referenced the parallels between how you would rear your dogs versus your kids, and just a little bit of common sense. Like, if your kid was anxious and nervous, you're not going to keep chucking them at the deep end and seeing if they're going to swim, literally or figuratively. You're going to try and build their confidence and do it strategically, etc., etc. And also, when your kid, there's a, the infamous phrase that I'm sure all parents will say is, oh, you're absolutely fine. I know you might have bumped over or cracked your head open, but oh no, that looks fine. And then whilst internally you're getting anxious about it, externally you don't convey that to your child. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, you're fine.
So, and I think that's
And we talked about something with the car seat.
Yeah.
Like, do you desensitize your kids to the car seat? Do you say, you know what? Instead of going out right now, I'm going to spend the next 2 weeks putting you in and giving you a cookie and taking you out. No, I mean, at some point, you're like, you're going in, I'm buckling you in, and we're leaving. I mean, it's so...
And we're probably going to go somewhere really nice.
Right.
But, and some, Neve's had her moments where she goes, I don't want to, for whatever reason, she says, I don't want to get in the car seat. And it's like, well, you have a choice here. You either get in the car seat or you're going to stay here on your own because we're going. And that's a one-way conversation. And funny enough, she always goes, okay, I'll get in the car seat. I don't placate her. I don't go, I'll give you a sweet for getting in the car seat or blah, blah, blah. Sometimes it's like, we have places to go, blah, blah, blah. And it is a little bit of like, you're going to get in the car seat. And that, I don't hit her, smack her, use force. No. It's just very much like, well, here's the options.
Right.
Yeah, and she generally picks the options that we wanted to, so that's all good.
And I'm sure when she hops in on her own, you're like, you know what, that was lovely. You are such a big girl for doing that, right? So that's the reward. Yeah. But it's not the bribed into it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the difference is when she does hop there and on her own, then I may go, oh, you're such a good girl, let's reinforce that. But when she has a little moment and she eventually begrudgingly, then do you know what? That's great that you got in there, but now we can go on our journey. The reinforcement is actually the opportunity to go somewhere nice.
Exactly.
Versus I'm not going to go OTT. And I think that's a misconception with dog behaviour. When my dog behaves inappropriately and it finally subsides, sometimes it isn't always the best option. Just allow the dog to digest, process, and then once the dog shows some real choices, that's the key thing, when it makes a good choice, reinforce the choice.
Right.
Yeah.
And I always say, if your kid came home and he got a grade in school and it was a C, and you threw him a party, and he got an A and you threw him a party, I mean, like, there's different levels of praise or reward for different levels of achievement.
Yeah. I mean, again, and it's relative, isn't it? If the C grade was amazing for that kid, absolutely you're going to acknowledge it and go, that's incredible. But if your kid consistently gets A's and they drop to a C,
you knew it was because they didn't do the homework, or they went out with their friends, or they were just like, I'm going to close to it. Then,
that's a different. You're definitely not going to reinforce that. You're definitely not going to get them. You give them reason. So again, it's just using a bit of common sense, isn't it?
I think we should write a book.
I think
how to raise your child
Well, you're
like
at the home stretch. Your kids are good. Mine's just starting out, so I've got a few years.
I survived.
Yeah, you survived. Yeah. So, Kathy very generously has. Kathy has her own online project. We're going to share. We'll get that link put up for you for Kathy's online stuff. It's fantastic. Anybody that knows me knows I don't promote or I don't say anybody or share my space with anybody that I don't believe in. I think that has benefit to those that are here. Obviously, you've seen some of the previous people that have come on and done Facebook Lives with me, so you know that Kathy's fantastic, and you've heard the brief conversation we've had. Kathy is very generously, she's got an ebook talking about canine body language, which she's very generously going to share with you guys. We'll sort that out. One of our team's going to be on it, and we're going to get that sorted out so that people can access that. I'll also share Kathy's some of Kathy's stuff so that you can have a look at what she does and share that with your friends. And for the next couple of weeks, obviously, Kathy's going to be getting her puppy, and in the near future, at some point, we're going to attempt to do, and this is a long-term project, or a live where we have a little bit of a conversation, maybe training session with the puppy, depending on how it goes. But we'll see. That's something in the planning. So unless there's any further questions, anything anybody wants to ask, you can share them in the comments, and I'll try and answer them there. Thank you, Kathy, for your time. It's been super fun. Enjoy the rest of your evening, everybody in the UK, and the day in the States.